This is an AMI podcast.
You are the only one who's going to be able to hold yourself to a higher standard because no one around you will know the difference. Welcome to AMI Audiobook Review. This is the weekly podcast where we chat all things audiobooks, and my name is Ramia Amuddin, host of the show. Here, back with Nisreen Abdelmajid. Nisreen, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
It is good to have you back. And as always, we're starting with a quote of the week. This is a really nice one, and our guest and regular contributor on the show, Aamer Khan, shared this one with me, so I thought we'd feature it. It's by Billy Porter from his book, Unprotected, which Aamer has read and talked about a little bit on the show. Also, it was one of the featured books of, or on the Sierra Library homepage of past months. So that's a nice loop around as well. But this is a great quote because I loved the gist of self-development in this quote. You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what you think of others thinking of you because you're the one who has to hold yourself accountable, hold yourself to your standard, hold yourself to what it is that you really intend to be, or I would say who it is that you really intend to be. Amazing way to kind of bring it to light in this quote. So I hope that you took away from it the amount that I took away from it. Because every week I feel like we're taking a lot away from these really intense, but also very insightful quotes. We're celebrating Pride Month, as I said. We continue to do that as we wrap up June. Let's get to the featured titles from the CELA Library homepage. So this is the Center for Equitable Library Access, CELAlibrary.ca. Starting with The Girl in the Middle by Anis Granovsky. This is a biography. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Then we move on to Love That Story, Observations from a Gorgeously Queer Life by Jonathan Van Ness, Humor and Anthologies. Final one on the featured titles is Still Just a Geek by Will Wheaton, Humor, Family and Relationships. We chatted about this last week. And this is a revamp of the original, which is Just a Geek. So check that out if you're a Will Wheaton fan. Nisreen, I'm coming over to you, girl. You have what's trending this week. What is going on in the audiobook world?
So, audiobooks.com tweeted out this week's most anticipated new listens for this summer. And we're really feeling the heat today, as we mentioned earlier. And comes with that, there's a whole bunch of new listens for us to enjoy. So, there's a positive side to this heat wave because. Remy, let me tell you, I'm sitting in the sunroom and the sun is directly on top of my head. So my hair is burning up at the time at this time.
The
So we're
sunroom
getting
always seems like such a lovely concept when it's cold outside.
it's nice.
But
It's
you
too
never
cold
think
in the
about the
winter, too
30.
hot in the summer. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's the iffy side to it. But yeah, so audiobooks.com, we're getting some from twisty thrillers to emotional literary sagas. This summer has some big releases in store, and they've rounded up 12 of the most anticipated audiobooks coming out this summer. So add them to your wish list so that you can be sure to enjoy them on your summer road trips, on the beach, or poolside, or walks in the heat wave, whatever you enjoy in the summer. I'll list a few here. So we start off with The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, Suspects by Danielle Steele, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Seven, Upgrade by Blake Crouch. The last one I'll mention is It Girl by Ruth Ware. For more audiobooks, check out their most anticipated audiobooks book list on their website, audiobooks.com. But really exciting list here. And I didn't think thrillers would be a popular genre in the summertime, but now that I think about it, there's always those types of thrillers where it's on the campsite, by the lake. You know what I'm talking about? In a
True.
cabin. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so it kind of fits.
Hauntings. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I think that there are some places, like you said, for the thriller in us to explore the summer side of things. but for the most part, I think we're trying to have fun, right? Like that's what we tend to default to: the fun, the upbeat, the cute, the casual, the summary, the summer cocktail books
Hmm.
of summer.
Yeah, exactly. But let me ask you, what's your favorite location in the summertime to listen to an audiobook?
Anywhere near the water. Now, granted, I haven't had too much opportunity for that in the last several years, but I throw back to almost 10 years ago. Wow, that is a long time ago.
Wow.
Almost 10 years ago when I went on a vacation, like an all inclusive resort vacation with my family, and I spent every day, pretty much half the day, just sitting by the beach or sitting by the pool listening to audiobooks, and that's all I did. I haven't had that intensive an experience by like lakes or cottage or anything since then, but it's so memorable to me that when I think back to that vacation, I barely remember anything else other than just chilling by the water listening to audiobooks.
I
That
was
was such a good time.
It's so funny you mentioned that because I was even thinking about going to Toronto Island and just
Yep.
sitting on the beach for just a full day
Yep.
listening to an audiobook, enjoying the sand in my between my toes and just getting that vibe with a cold drink.
Mhm.
That's the environment I would picture listening to an audiobook,
That's
but
true.
I would listen
That's
to a
true.
more romantic book when it comes to that setting. Thrillers would just get me anxious at the
Yeah.
time, and it's not the
Yeah.
perfect location for me. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just me.
Maybe the
But
thrillers we can save for the backyard barbecue, after everybody
yeah,
leaves, it's
that makes sense.
dusk. Yeah.
But
You
then you're
chill.
just gonna, for me, I would just feel like I'm being watched or something is gonna sneak up
Oh,
behind
for sure.
me. It's in
For
the
sure.
dark.
Can't
I
even be in your
mean,
own home anymore.
I know.
But this is just
So
the two of us, right?
but this is
Other
just the
people are
two of
probably
us.
rolling
We
their eyes.
we get freaked out easily. I
Yeah.
think I think everybody knows that by now. So thrillers is
Exactly.
it's just not our cup of tea for genre picks.
Yeah,
But
and if you
yeah,
go back to October and November when we were talking a lot of thrillers, you can get the gist of that.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm your host, Ramia Amuddin, and we're going to jump into a little bit of a preview, a little bit of a recommendation, and kind of a throwback to a past episode of Audiobook Review as well. So this month for the Kelly and Company Book Club, we've um, chosen a recommendation by George Quarcoo. And the book's title is A Long Way Gone by Ishmael Beah. This is Memoirs of a Boy Soldier and released in 2007. So, this is a formal recommendation by George for us to read and gather at the end of the month to talk about on Kelly and Company. But the reason why I bring it back here as a throwback is Catherine Thatcher, who joined us a couple weeks ago on the show, had talked about how much this book had impacted her and how often she goes back to reading it just because it was so incredibly written, and the kinds of feedback that she gave about the book was fascinating. So you can go back to that, but let me give you a synopsis, but because if you want to join us or give your thoughts on the book next week when we discuss it on Kelly and Company, you can do that. We are discussing it on Thursday, June 30th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on the show. All right, so here's the synopsis. This absorbing account by a young man who, as a boy of 12, gets swept up in Sierra Leone's civil war goes beyond even the best journalistic efforts in revealing the life and mind of a child soldier abducted into the trials of warfare. Beah's harrowing journey transforms him overnight from a child enthralled by American hip hop music and dance to an internal refugee bereft of family, wandering from village to village in a country grown deeply divided by the indiscriminate atrocities of unruly, sociopathic, rebelling army forces. Beah then finds himself in the army in a drug filled life of casual mass slaughter that lasts until he's 15 when he's brought to a rehabilitation center sponsored by UNICEF and partnering NGOs. So this is told in clear accessible language by a young writer with a gifted literary voice. And this memoir seems destined to become a classic firsthand account of war and the ongoing plight of child soldiers in conflict worldwide. Like I said, we'll be discussing this in less than a week on June 30th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the usual roundtable segment on Kelly and Company. But I want to bring in Nisreen and Amer Khan to talk a little bit about this. Nisreen, starting with you. Now, this is a very serious read, and sometimes, like we said earlier in the show, we're not totally going for this kind of thing, but the impact that this book has had on um, not only Catherine, but George Quarcoo, who recommended the book, seems to be very, very palpable. And the discussions are going to be quite powerful, I think. And I wanted to ask you if there was a book that does that to you, a book that you can think of that you've read a while back or have reread that you know had really made an impact on the subject for you.
I mean, the last time I can think of books that were really serious that I've read was in high school. And one book that really stuck with me to this day, and I still think about it, is The Kite Runner. And
Hmm.
I've spoken to many people about this, and a lot of people felt like it did have an impact on them. It did make a big difference. I read it, I watched the movie. It just made a big difference in my life, and it made me reflect on it so much. We had to write essays, and normally I would hate writing essays for different books that we read in high school, but for this one, I had so much to say. It was a very deep, serious book that I'm not really used to, and to this day, it stuck with me. Another one was Lord of the Flies, but Kite Runner really stuck with me
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah. And I think the accounts of events and life experiences that people go through when it's written in these forms, yeah, it is uncomfortable and more than
Hmm.
uncomfortable. Sometimes we outright refuse to want to know about these things, but I think going past that resistance and getting into it can get us to places where we're like, wow, this was very, very powerful. So I hear that, and I feel that with you for the Kite Runner as well. I've heard you talk about the impact that book has had on you on other shows. So thank you for sharing that. And Amir, over to you. Your thoughts or um, ideas or reflections on reading this book.
So I haven't quite started this book yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I totally expect it to be a very serious book. I think this crosses into a little bit of the territory of, these types of books aren't for everyone. A lot of people can get turned off by these types of topics, and it affects people in different ways. It definitely has a heavier
Mm-hmm.
impact. One of the books I read in the past, which I've spoken about before, is titled "I Shall Not Hate." The author escapes me at the moment, but it is also another really powerful book where, every chapter you sort of read and you can't understand why this person is not upset at life and the universe in general, but he has such a positive attitude even after losing three of his daughters in a conflict of war, which he has absolutely nothing to do with besides just being there. Um, very, very powerful book. But this particular book reminds me a little bit of the movie from 2006 with Leo DiCaprio called Blood Diamond. I mean,
Right.
most of the movie is obviously about conflict diamonds and those pieces, but if you recall the end of the movie, there is a sort of side plot with a father and son where the son has been taken in for to become a child soldier, and that part always stuck with me in terms of that particular movie.
Yeah, I think that you make some interesting comparisons here, particularly with the platform, right? So with books or movies, for some reason I go back to something like TikTok where you can scroll past things, um, scroll past serious topics, or just move beyond them into other things that you feel like. But when you commit to, movies as well as books, particularly, you're diving right in, right? And like you said, that resistance is more like you read the title and you're like, I don't think so. I don't think I can handle something like this. But to commit to the book itself is to say, brace yourself, right, for what may come of the content. So definitely, a serious turn of conversation at the moment. We are going to get into some lighter stuff with you, Amir, but wanted to say that there are a bunch of us reading this book, people who are reading it from the Kelly and Company book club, and as well the evening book club that you run. So we'll have some, I think, quite riveting discussions about this next week. Now, moving into other audiobook highlights with you, the theme for today is the beginning, the middle, and the end. So, the last time you were on the show, just as a follow up, you talked about abstract concepts with us, which was really, really great. And we ended with some of the serious police style books. Is this what you continued with on your reading journey this month?
Yes and no. So I talked about the book that LA Confidential was based off of, and in a lot of cases, movie adaptations are based on books, but they've put them into a modern context or put them into a different time period. So that's what I found with that particular one. The first book in that series is called The Black Dahlia, and the time period is completely different from the movie. It's actually in the 40s. The recording wasn't specifically great, so I attempted it, but I abandoned it. And then after that, I sort of reached out to more familiar pieces. Um, Last month, or 2 months ago, for the book club, we did Michael Connelly's The Poet, and that's a brand new series for me. Michael Connelly has two very, very popular series, which are, I think, in the dozens already in terms of how far they've gotten in terms of novels. So we read The Poet, which I thought was great. Also, a very sort of serious police procedure piece set in the late 80s, early 90s, and that was great. The next one I picked up and read the first three in that series was Clive Cussler's, which I've talked about before, which is basically straight up, action adventure type of stories with a Dirk Pitt, I believe the main character is. So they're a lot of fun. They're very much summer reads. There's not too much to think about. They sometimes delve into some sort of world politics and pieces, but it's more of a backdrop than an actual topic of discussion. It's really basically action movies fit into books.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious as to where you are, because this is just like 1/3 of the puzzle with what you're into and reading this month. So the other parts are what you're in the middle of. So things that you've picked up, or even in some of these cases, just started right in the middle, not really going for book one. So what are some of these?
So I always find it interesting that when somebody like myself or somebody who's an avid audiobook or any book reader really likes an author, they try to read everything from the author typically. I know you're a big Colleen Hoover fan, and everybody has their
Mm-hmm.
sort of favorite author. But I'm always curious that sometimes when you look at the order of a really nice series that you really enjoyed, you're sort of surprised that that the author went back and wrote an in-between book or a side plot. So that happened to me. I've spoken about Janet Ivanovich's Stephanie Plum novels, which are fairly large novels, but again, they're a lot of fun because they're about a female bounty hunter who really doesn't know what she's doing and captures criminals more by accident and luck than anything else. And the whole thing takes place in suburban New Jersey, which adds another sort of flavor to everything. Um, but there's a whole sort of side series I sort of missed with a character named Diesel, and these ones happen to have a little bit of magic to them. So if you're into that,
Oh.
and they're much shorter. I think all four or five are novellas. They're all under 9 hours, and they're just a lot of fun if you're looking to have a summer read like that.
Now, for you, it was picking these in between novels up after all the Stephanie Plum stuff. But can we skip the Stephanie Plum altogether and just do the little ones?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently on, I think, number 26 of the Stephanie Plum novels.
Holy.
So yeah, going back to them wasn't a problem at all. They really don't tie in very much, because, like I said, this author actually went back and wrote these, so they're not really in series too much, especially if you're just reading these particular Diesel ones, like I said. So
She just really liked the world. and wanted to do something else in it.
Well, I think she was specific about trying to put something smaller together for fans. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of times when authors are, especially with series, there's some characters that really speak to the audience, and they're like, oh, we want to see more of this particular character. And
Yeah.
sometimes they get their own series, sometimes they get a mini series like this. And I think that's what happened in this case, where people, saw Diesel actually makes his first appearance in a Christmas episode, or a Christmas novella that she wrote for Christmas for Stephanie Plum. And I think a lot of people really enjoyed his character and wanted to see him come
Right.
back. So
Super fans. Okay. Let's keep going. Anything else? How about Nora Roberts? You've read a lot of their stuff.
so that's what I've like. I'm continually amazed at how well she can write a formulaic series, similar to something like James Bond, where you know what the sort of basic outline is going to be of the movie or the book, but it's just the way that she does it that makes it so interesting. Or something formulaic like Law and Order, the Eve Dallas series, or the In Depth series as it's called. There's a side plot that sort of inches along. If you're a fan of something like How I Met Your Mother or something, where there's sort of like a background plot that inches along. She does it really, really well with this particular series, without starving or giving too much to the reader. So I'm on, I think, number 17 now. I think I mentioned before, I think there's like 60 something of these novels. And I finally figured out the classification for these novels. Apparently, it's
Okay.
romance suspense. So
Okay, there you go. That's for
exactly,
Nisreen.
exactly. So
That's
if
for
you like,
Nisreen.
things that are set in the slightly future without
That's
getting too
mine.
crazy, you're looking for a little detective work, but you're also looking for, some dives into marriage and what it might be
Mm-hmm.
from both perspectives in terms of male and female.
I'll take it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's wild the way she meshes all those pieces together in each novel.
It's
And
actually perfect. It's like hot dogs at a sports game, right? Like just enough food to keep the non-sports people there,
yeah,
and just enough sports to keep the foodies there. Okay, amazing. Now, then there's the third of your progress this month, which is the stuff that you're really looking forward to completing. Even if you're not fully there yet, you're at the end. You're right at the finish line. What are
yeah.
these?
Greg Horowitz is another one of my favorite authors with the Orphan X series. He has dozens of books, and I've sort of commented on them in previous times I've been on the show. But the Orphan X series is probably his crowning series that people absolutely love, and his seventh novel, which I thought was the last, but clearly after reading it and seeing a couple of things from fans, it's clearly not. And that's something that surprises you from authors too. Like, where could they possibly go from this? The series has to end, and it's like, nope. From the first two pages, you're like, okay, it's not ending. All right. Um, really, really well done. Again, this is another author that you sort of go in with an expectation, and they just really tell the story that is fantastic and interesting and something you just don't expect.
Mm-hmm.
I like to call this series a spy book with a heart and a moral compass. So there's a lot about the central character and how he's trying to quote unquote be normal,
Yeah.
and what that might mean because he's not been normal all his life. So yeah, there's a lot of little
Rehumanizing him.
rehumanizing. And there's throughout the series certain things that have happened to him which he did not expect, in terms of, a lot of authors talk about not having blood ties of family, but then acquiring a family and they don't know it. And there's definitely elements of that in this series.
Amazing. Well, Amer, I'm sure there are other books that you're just about to finish, but we won't get to them today because we're at the end of the episode. That's something you can count on every week. We'll get to the end of the episode. But thank you so much, and we'll follow up
No
with
problem.
you in about a month.
Sure.
Take care.
Aamer Khan joining us always at the end of the month, right before our book clubs reconvene. That was on purpose. So that is the end of this week's episode of AMI Audiobook Review. Until next week, where we have more chat with you, this time with our friends from the Sela Library. Happy audiobook listening.
This was an AMI podcast. For more accessible media, visit ami.ca.